I'm very honored to be here today. I was thrilled to be asked to be your keynote, to be in a room with such incredible budding entrepreneurs. As Petra said, my name is Colleen. I'm from Canada, and I've lived in the Netherlands for 12 years now. During this time, I've mostly worked as an advisor and a communication consultant, and namely for the city of Amsterdam and the Amsterdam brand. But today I'm here to talk to you about my own brand, which is Stuff Dutch People Like. And we have no more music, that's great. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Stuff Dutch People Like, it is a website, a blog, and it's also several books. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about how it all started. What is unique to Stuff Dutch People Like is currently its reach and the size of the audience. So a lot of people do ask, how did you get to almost 500,000 fans on social media? There are about 300,000 regular readers on the website, and there's about 15,000 comments right now. So it's a very interactive site. There's a lot of discussion happening, a lot of debate, a lot of really hilarious comments that are happening on there. And like I said, on social media, we're nearly at 500,000 fans, which is something that is quite shocking. I try when I post not to think of the reach because it scares me. Right now, the monthly reach of Stuff Dutch People Like is about 20 to 30 million individuals. So it has grown very fast from when I first started the Facebook page and the blog at the end of 2010. Now, a lot of the content, people ask, how with this audience do you have the reach of 20 to 30 million people? And that is a multiplier effect, which happens wonderfully on social media. A lot of the content that I post and a lot of the blogs that I write are very sharey, as I like to call them. So people do feel inclined to share them with their friends, whether on Twitter or on Facebook or through the blog itself. A recent example of that was this video that was posted earlier this year. And a fan had actually sent this to me a couple of years ago. It was a blurry sort of a video, but it quickly showed a Dutch mother hopping on a bicycle with 3 children and speeding off. And she was wearing heels as well. So I posted this video up in January, and I thought, okay, we'll see. I think this is interesting, and I wrote a tagline about Dutch supermoms. And very quickly, the content started being shared. And normally, I'm happy when there's about 1,000 shares. I think, okay, this is great, this is working. And this video reached 53 million people. It had 18 million video views on the Facebook page. And if you look at the bottom, it was shared 204,000 times. So it exploded in one day. As a mother myself, my first reaction wasn't, woohoo, this is great for the brand. It was, okay, are the children blurry enough? Because I wanted to make sure that, and the children you can see, you don't see their faces here, but with such an audience and such a reach, I do have to think about these things, about privacy, about other people's interests. But I did speak to the mother afterwards. She contacted me. I tried to find her, but she found me, and she was happy with her supermom status. So. But this is the very exciting thing about Stuff Dutch People Like is the reach that it has and is the celebration about Dutch culture. A lot of people ask me why I started Stuff Dutch People Like or how I started or what was the first blog I wrote. And I'll tell you a quick story about that. I moved here in 2004, and I didn't really get around to biking until about 2005. I was just a little bit overwhelmed with all the traffic here in the center. And so eventually I got on a bike and I drove to my office, which was in the time at the Amsterdam Science Park. And as I was biking, I was like those very annoying internationals tourists, and I was sort of weaving all over the road, and I cut off someone. And this is rush hour in Amsterdam. As many of you know, rush hour, it's all business. This isn't a sightseeing tour. People have to get from point A to point B. So I cut someone off, and he was very angry, to say the least. And he started yelling at me. And I had lived here for about a year, and I didn't speak really any Dutch. And in this kind of throaty is what I could hear. I heard the word typhus. And this stood out at me. Whoops, I think my mic's gone off. Because he said it a few times in a row. So I recognized it, similar to the word typhoid in English. And I went back to my office, and at the time I worked with a Dutch colleague in IT, and I said to him, could it have been possible that somebody said the word typhus to me when he was angry? And he sort of nonchalantly looked up from his desk and he said, yeah, he was mad at you and he wished typhus on you. And he continued typing again. So I was now even more confused than when I had heard the word. And he said, Google it. And so I sat down at my desk that morning and I Googled it. And what I learned was that the Dutch are very unique, that they are the only culture in the world that swears by wishing diseases onto somebody. So not only are they wishing diseases, but even stranger is that these diseases are from centuries ago. So things like cholera or the plague, smallpox, typhus. So for me, this was totally bizarre, and my first encounter with Dutch culture that left me completely bewildered. So what I like to say is that was in 2005 when I started my field notes. So I wrote this down, and I started on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, jotting down notes, jotting down my own anecdotes of living here in the Netherlands. And I, at this time, decided that I wanted to write a book. I thought there isn't a lot written, again, this is 2005, about Dutch culture. There's one book in English, many of you probably know it, Undutchables, and it was written about 20 years prior. And I read it and I thought, oh, you know what, it's not that positive about Dutch culture. It's a little bit out of date, or a lot, and it kind of left me with a bad taste. And I thought, you know what, these crazy, weird, wacky things that I'm encountering, they need to be celebrated. So I had a plan, and my plan was simple. At the time, I wanted to write a book. I wanted to get a big fat book contract. It was all in the media about people writing and getting book deals, about bloggers, about a guy in France who wrote Year in the Merit, and I thought, that's what I want to do. And I wanted very badly to become a published author. Now, I had no idea how to do this. No one in my circle was a writer. I had no contacts with anyone who had written a book, with publishing agencies. It was really something very, very far from what I knew. But I still had this goal. So I started researching, and I realized that actually the days of just calling up a publisher or sending them an email or sending in your manuscript were over. That literally publishers receive thousands of manuscripts a day, and they sit in a big pile. So you had to stand out. So I did research on how could I stand out to get this publishing contract. And everything I read came to this idea that you had to build your own audience. That essentially you had to come to the table with a market so that a publisher could see, okay, this is a worthy investment, you're going to sell a lot of books. After all, the publishing world has been in trouble the last 2 decades, and their model is very clear. You need to come to the table with an audience, with a fully written book often, and show them that they're going to make money from your book. Essentially, they're like an investor, and they want to see that you have a market. So I still thought, okay, I will do this, but I will try to build my own audience first. So the step to writing online wasn't a huge jump for me, because at the time I worked in online publishing. Again, I didn't aspire to be a blogger. Blogging was relatively new in 2005, 2006. So when I actually started the blog in 2010, I thought, okay, I can write online, and this will keep me accountable. This will make sure that I actually write this book, because there'll be some people, maybe 50, maybe 100 that will be following this blog, and maybe I'll feel this incentive to keep writing for them. So it was more kind of a self-discipline and a tool. And then I opened, like I said, in 2010, the Facebook page. And what I realized was very quickly my blog posts got a lot of traction. So I wrote about the story about cutting someone off, I, of course, at the time wrote about Zwarte Piet, my opinions, and I touched on a lot of other topics about Dutch culture. And very quickly, things started being shared and the audience started growing. When I got to 100 fans, I was ecstatic. I thought this was the coolest moment because I was also doing so anonymously. At the time when I was working for the city of Amsterdam, and I still am, I was a bit nervous. I thought, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to write about Dutch culture, but how are my colleagues going to feel? I didn't want them to feel like I was sitting in a meeting taking notes about them, which I kind of was. But I didn't want them to know the next day I was going to publish it. So I did it all anonymously. I told a few people. I told my mother she was not allowed to comment on Facebook or the blog. I thought it would be totally tragic if she was the only person going, well done. So she was sworn to secrecy. And it started going. And from there, I continued to write. And the more I wrote, the more I realized it was getting traction and things were growing. And around this time, I still very much had this goal of writing a book. And I started to read Dutch newspapers to improve my Dutch. And I read an article. And this is what I learned, that a total of 7 authors in the Netherlands can live off of their book sales. And this was the opposite of like an aha moment to me. This was like a very sad moment. And I thought, how is this possible? Here I was thinking, okay, I'm going to create my audience. I'm going to get this book deal. I'm going to land a beach and the royalties are going to flow in. But I realized I needed to look into this model a little bit more. I loved writing, I loved the community that I was building, but realistically, I also wanted to build a business and I wanted to make some money. So what I found out was that across the world, the average book deal, royalties, you get about 10 to 12%. So 10 is about the average. For a first-time author, it could be as low as 6 or 7%. Now, if you think about what the price of a book is, so we think 10 euros is the average price of a book, that means authors get a whole euro per book they sell. Now, in the Netherlands, a best-selling book can be as low as 5,000 copies. So, if you do the math, 5,000 copies, you're on the bestseller list, you've maybe written your book for 3 years, your income is 5,000 euros. So this to me was a depressing thought, but it made sense when I realized, okay, that's why only about 7 people in the Netherlands can live off of this. So this is when I looked into the publishing model. I started talking to a few people in the industry, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this myself. I had the manuscript because essentially I'd written a lot on the blog and a lot off of the blog. I realized I had the marketing channels. I had the Facebook community. I could sell books through the blog. And I had the experience because in my job I worked with a lot of writers, editors, designers. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go for this. This is what it looks like to edit a blog with an 8-month-old baby, edit a book. So I decided to write the book, and this is the first edition of Stuff Dutch People Like. It came out at the end of November 2012. And again, I was ambitious. I printed 5,000 books. And I thought, okay, I'm going to print these 5,000. This is considered a large print run for the Netherlands as a first-time author. But I thought there are these economies of scale, as we know with printing. So it was actually, in the long run, cheaper to print more. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try to do this. And it was very scary, but that Christmas, myself and my husband, we packed all the books ourselves. So we sold them through the Facebook page, through the blog. We were packing in our living room, sending the books all over the world. And by January 1st, the first print run had sold out. So 5,000 books. And it was incredible because the community that I had built was embracing it so wonderfully. They were so excited, and they were also so excited that I had been honest about the process, like, hey, I'm going to self-publish. Let's see if we can do this together. As soon as the books got into bookstores, very quickly, it entered on the top 10 list, so top 10 English nonfiction. And there you can see the first edition at number 9. So where am I now? I've now sold over 50,000 copies of Stuff Dutch People Like. There's been 2 editions. I've also done a Dutch translation. And I wrote a second book, Stuff Dutch People Say, which came out this past Christmas. And I have a product line, which is launching hopefully in the next 2 months, and a third book this fall. Thank you. Thanks. Now, for all the success that Stuff Dutch People Like has had, I want to take you back to a pivotal moment in this journey that I will never forget. And that was about 6 months after publishing the book. It had already sold out the first print run. I'd had a successful launch. It was on the bestseller list. And I went to a networking event for entrepreneurs and for startups here in Amsterdam. And I went with a colleague, and she introduced me to 2 guys who are fairly well known in the startup scene in the Netherlands. And she left me standing with them with the introduction. This is Colleen. She's just written a book. And she then walked away. And I stood there, and they said, "Oh, what book have you written?" And I said, "Oh, it's called Stuff Dutch People Like. It's about Dutch culture." And the one guy turned to the other, and he said, "Do you know that Facebook page, Stuff Dutch People Like?" And the guy said, "Yes, I do." He said, "It's actually a friend of mine who owns that Facebook page." And so I was slightly confused, and I said again, "Yeah, that's my Facebook page." And they continued to have this conversation, and he said, "Yeah, those guys are so funny. They started that 2 years ago. They're hilarious." So I interrupted again, and I said, "Yeah, that's actually my Facebook page, and that's the book I've written." Now, what he said next, I'll never forget. He leaned over, he patted me on the shoulder, and he said to me, "You know what? That's kind of been done. Those guys are doing it really well." He said, "If you want to write a book about Dutch culture, I'll give you one tip. You should do something that no one's ever done before." And I stood there. What did I do? I actually stood there silently. And I gulped, and I thought, and they walked away. And I let them walk away. Now, why did I do that? Why did I feel so uncomfortable standing up, like Petra said, owning my success? I stood there, and this is a moment I'll never forget. And in retrospect, I thought of all those things I could have said, how I should have said it, what I wanted to say, but I didn't. I stood there silently. Now, many of you might recognize yourself in this story. You might feel that you've had an experience like this. And it's not uncommon. It wasn't unique to me. It's not uncommon to women in business. Men systematically overestimate their abilities. And women, time and time again in studies, underestimate their performance and their abilities, and they downplay it. Now, I'll let you take that in for a moment because it's rather depressing to hear. But there is a flip side. And the flip side is that recently, in the past 3 years, there's been about 6 studies, everyone from Goldman Sachs to Columbia University, and they have studied women in leadership, women in business, and what they have found in all of these studies is women actually outperform men on every measure of profitability. So, what does this mean? These 2 slides, these 2 profound statements, that women underestimate their abilities, but yet they underperform. And what we have, I think, is a crisis situation. We have an enormous confidence gap. And why does this confidence gap matter for women? It matters because it turns out that confidence is just as important as competence in the quest for success. And in entrepreneurial environments, it's actually more important. So this is huge. The confidence you have is more important in some cases than even your abilities. But we don't need to worry about your abilities because I've just told you that women outperform men. So we've got the abilities, we need to work on the confidence. Now, when all these studies came out a few years ago, the simple answer was to say, okay, women, you just have to be more confident, believe in yourself, and then it's all sorted, right? If you believe in yourself, success will come. But that is not the case, unfortunately. It's not the case because the system, the traditional system right now, is not working for women. And it's not working because A, it's been mainly made by and for men, and also it doesn't fit with the new female economy. So the idea that women have to try harder, that they have to just believe in themselves, that they have to lean in, I'm sort of against this kind of rhetoric because I think it's again putting the fault on women themselves. When sure, we need to be more confident, but the system also needs to change. Now, some of you might recognize this is Marissa Myers. She's the CEO of Yahoo. And in 2005, when she was pregnant with her twins, she made a very public announcement, and she said, I am going to take 2 weeks off maternity leave after my twins, but don't worry, I'm going to be working the entire time. Now, to me, this was one of the saddest moments of a public statement, a press release issued from a woman in such a visible position of leadership, of success, and in Silicon Valley, nonetheless. Now, I don't want to take down Marissa because I also think there's enough of women taking down other women. So what I do want to say is the wonderful thing about all of us here is we don't have to try to be a square peg fitting into a round hole. We don't have to play this game. We don't have to fit into this system. Everyone here in the room, you came here because you are an entrepreneur or you aspire to be one. And the beautiful thing is, you can remake the system. You can make your own game, you can make your own set of rules, and you can kick ass doing so. Now, I want to take you back to the Stuff Dutch People Like story for a moment, because what we know is confidence. The best definition I've ever found is confidence is actually turning ideas into action. So it's turning an idea into an action. And that takes away all of the fluff about self-talk or believing in yourself. That gives you something tangible that you can work on. You can practice this. So if I go back to Stuff Dutch People Like, what we also know about confidence in women is that perfectionism is the biggest confidence killer. And women are primarily have more perfectionist tendencies than men. So when I first launched the blog in 2010, I asked my brother to make me a WordPress template. And I had all sorts of ideas, what I wanted the brand to be, how the logo should look, how the photos should be, what the website should look like. I had a million things, and I went back and forth with my brother multiple times over email, over Skype sessions, and I had all sorts of changes. Now, he made this basic site for me, and I was not happy with it. So we went back and forth, until he said to me, Colleen, perfect is the enemy of good enough. And to me, this was the best piece of business advice I've ever received. Because I realized, yeah, I could go back and forth forever about minor details, and I was not getting any action. I had ideas, but nothing was happening with these ideas. I was obsessed with reworking it, redoing it, fixing things. And as soon as I heard this from him, I thought, okay, let's press publish today. Let's do it, and let's see what happens. Now, is the blog perfect today? No. Are the books perfect? Absolutely not. Is every post I make on social media perfect? Far from it. But I have to train myself every day to make these type of good enough decisions that force me into action and force me to be confident. Tory Burch is the second youngest self-made billionaire in America. She's now worth $1 billion after last year. And something she lives by and preaches daily is, if it doesn't scare you, you probably are not dreaming big enough. So this year I had the resolution with Stuff Dutch People Like that every single week I was going to do something that scared me. I was going to do something that pushed me out of my comfort zone, whether that was sending someone an email, asking someone for a lead, asking for help, making a presentation like this. I was going to do something that I felt deeply uncomfortable with. And I have to say, it's been halfway through the year, and every single thing I did on a Friday has led to some sort of action that would have never taken place. Of course, they haven't all been huge hitters, but they've at least got me training this ability to take risks, to force myself to do something outside of my comfort zone. And the important thing as an entrepreneur is to realize there is no external validation. And when I told you about my story, how I desperately wanted a publisher, why did I want a publisher? Because this was some sort of a stamp of approval. This was a gold star. Oh, your writing is good. Oh, you've done it. This was a pat on the back. But as an entrepreneur, like Hannah mentioned, we are often alone. The reward is all yours, but also the risk and the responsibility is all yours as well. So it's important to become your own cheerleader. And I think we also as women have a responsibility to become cheerleaders of the other female entrepreneurs around us. Now, I want to leave you with one final thought, and that is, I would like you to join me. We have 6 months, a little bit over, until the end of the year. And what I would like from everyone in the room is to join me on making these kind of good enough decisions with your own business. So don't dwell on the perfect. Make sure you turn all those ideas into action. And the second point is that I would like you to join me in doing something scary, something outside your comfort zone for your business once a week. And more importantly, I would love for you to keep me in the loop so we can all support each other and we can see what incredible things come out of the rest of 2016. Thank you.